Bishop Gaiters, we've got another amazing episode planned for today. Good to see you again. How are you today, Bishop?
My friend, it is great, so great to see you here. On this sixth day here in October in 2020. So very excited to unpack this volume two concerning pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma.
Yeah, and Bishop, you have been just exploding right now. The reach of the global spiritual revolution is expanding, rightfully so. And I just want to make sure that people know where they can see you in the various locations and hear you. Of course, 92.9 FM, liferadionj.com/Gators. You've got a new syndicated program coming online soon. I forget the details. You told us briefly about it last week. Remind us again, Bishop, when that's starting and where people will be
Yeah,
able to hear it.
yeah, we're going to be starting on WOR 710 AM, and we cannot go into the iHeart studios because of COVID-19. So the studios are shut down for the rest of the year. So we have to simulcast it here from my home in Manhattan. But we're going to be starting with them not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, okay? Because we want to make sure our quality is up to par, and we want to make sure that everything is in order as far as our sound quality. So not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I have to confess to you, Jason, I'm so very, very excited about this great opportunity. Now we're on the level of a Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, Laura Ingraham, those people in that stratosphere. So we're so very honored to be in that company. Absolutely.
Well, Bishop, I think you're standing head and shoulders above some of those you've mentioned, but we'll leave that to viewers to decide. I also want to remind people, Bishop, that they can tune into our simulcasts on the Global Spiritual Revolution Radio and Media Group YouTube channel. I want to welcome the over 130 people who are watching us on there. And Bishop, there's been some explosive growth to the channel. Some of the videos that we've done in the past are just getting a ton of attention. And it's interesting, typically we're getting, several dozen thousand views on these videos. And obviously, Bishop, with you co-hosting Alex Jones and appearing on InfoWars, a lot of people are becoming aware of the Bishop, and some of these videos are getting huge numbers of views. We were talking last night about this video that really is standing out, 515,000 views to volume 8 of the Kobe Bryant series. And I mean, that's just amazing, Bishop. I want to invite some of those 515,000 viewers to subscribe to the Bishop. People who are watching us on Crowdsource the Truth right now can go to the Global Spiritual Revolution Radio and Media Group YouTube channel. It's also important, Bishop, I want to remind people that they can financially support what you're doing by going to paypal.me/GSRR Media Group and making a financial contribution of their choice. This is really important, Bishop, because we have all these thousands of people tuning into your teachings. This work can't continue without the financial support of the audience. And I think, Bishop, some of these large corporate entities are becoming irritated with us that we're doing this direct-to-viewer sponsorship because it eliminates the corporate middlemen that would typically have control over what someone like you or I could say.
Jason, you are so very right, 100% right, as always, my friend, because you and I represent the very etymology of what a true journalist should be here in the 21st century, here in these United States for America. We're not controlled by any corporate elite. We're not aligned within any of the pockets of the American corporatocracy system. So, which means you and I, my friend, who are supported by God first and through our listeners second. This is how you and I can be so effective. You and I, and you have such a powerful platform, Jason. And I'm so very honored to be a part of your team. And as I said to you many times, you and Alex Jones, you guys are indeed my mentors in this business because you've been in this business a long time. And especially the technical side that you're teaching me. So I'm so very appreciative of that, Jason. As you know, we're just so very honored to be a part of your team here at Crowdsource the Truth.
It's my pleasure to have you, Bishop, and you and I have been working very hard behind the scenes to improve the quality both of the video and the audio, and I hope that viewers are enjoying that. Bishop, there's one rather unfortunate piece of news I want to share with you. I learned this just after our show last week. You know, I have for several years been doing shows on Crowdsource the Truth with Clinton whistleblower Larry Nichols. And, you know, Larry missed our show last week. He's been recovering from some real bad injuries, and he was a longtime smoker, so his pulmonary health wasn't very good. And unfortunately, Larry succumbed a week ago this past Sunday to his illness. And I did not become aware of that until Wednesday, so I just wanted to let you know, Bishop, and also any of our viewers who perhaps hadn't heard that yet. Larry Nichols, unfortunately, no longer with us.
You know, that's it's sad, Jason, because Larry Raymond Nichols, he was a true patriot, a true truther in this generation, and his voice will be missed. But at the same time, his voice, though it will not be here in the physicality realm, but his voice will continue throughout many generations. So we need more Larry Nichols throughout the country and throughout the world, without a doubt.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, some of the secrets that Larry knew about the Clintons have left the planet along with him. I do want to wish Larry's family and all of his friends and supporters the very best. It really was very disappointing news to learn of that, Bishop. But I think we've got most of that out of the way now. I want to get started with your presentation, Bishop.
Absolutely, my friend. Pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. Now, just to recap where we left off last week, and I'm probably will end up backtracking because I found out through some of my deep research this past week, Jason, that what's happening now in places like Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Chicago, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, in Louisville, Kentucky, is the offspring of something that has been planted in this country going back many decades, and including around the world going back thousands of years within the term feudalism. So I really want to concentrate on that today to backtrack in order to move forward to understand what's going on in the foreground today. Now, remember Dr. Werner Heisenberg that you and I had touched on last week, a great German physicist, but he was a protege of the late Dr. Albert Einstein, where Dr. Werner Heisenberg designed the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which exactly means the more accurately that you and I measure the exact velocity of a particle, a human being, the less accurately we can measure its position in space. So then the particle does not exist at all. In other words, if you and I will go outside tonight, Jason, and to see a star that is at least 400 light years away, the star that you and I will be looking at tonight, we're thinking in our minds that that is the exact shape and circumference and manifestation of what the star looks like. But in actuality, you and I, because of this Heisenberg uncertainty principle, you and I, my friend, are only looking at a star of what it looked like 400 years prior to where you and I would be standing tonight. That's a powerful phenomenon as we're dissecting this pawns in the game, the full weaponization of Black trauma. So Aristotle's first principles of thinking concerning basic proposition or assumption that cannot be deduced from any other proposition or assumption. In other words, we call this the parallax algorithm, parallax effect, Thereby, it becomes a parallax view. So then, the term, Jason, quickly, parallax, as we're kind of relaying this schematical foundation concerning what's going on concerning the Breonna Taylor case. So then, the term parallax simply means an apparent motion of an object against a distant background, contingent according to the perspective shift of the moment. In other words, in layman's terms, it means chaos theory. And you had showed that butterfly symbol on last week. So, chaos theory simply means that there is order out of chaos and there is chaos out of order. That term or that phrase was tattooed on the chest of the late George Floyd. So, which means that all order is not necessarily order, and that all chaos is not necessarily chaos. So, within the prism or the etymology of the word chaos, it also means a disordering of an order in order to create a new order in which you and I call the manipulation of reality, time, and probability through the manipulation of perceived manipulation, which you and I can go to another level today, which means the manipulation of a manipulation concerning this pawns in the game, the total weaponization of Black trauma. So
Bishop, real
within,
quick, I
yeah, go
just
ahead.
wanted to bring to your attention that during this past week in my walk around New York City, I saw like an electrician's truck or some sort of, maybe it was plumbers or something, some kind of
Yes.
handyman kind of truck that had that dual-headed bird on the truck.
Wow, Jason. And it begs the question, who was George Floyd? 6 foot 6.5, but the coffin was 6 foot one. Another topic for another day. How does a man strength like that? You and I are being lied to. And in that symbol, the 33rd degree of the Masonic order. Now, as a side note, as we're talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma, no Black person or any person of color either in this country or around the world, can ever attain a 33 and one half degree level. No person of color can attain a 33rd and one half degree level of the free global Masonic order. Now, remember during the Kobe Bryant series, we may mention that the area where Kobe died in, Calabasas, is indeed the 33rd congressional district in the state of California. The sheriff of LA County, Alex Villanueva, who gave the press conference, Jason, that man is the 33rd sheriff in the history of LA County. So you got the 33rd congressional district in the state of California, Calabasas. You got the 33rd sheriff in the history of LA County, Alex Villanueva, who gave the press conference on the grounds near Calabasas, and George Soros, who owns the Open Society Foundation, owns that plot of land according to the county records of Los Angeles County. And so then, as we're talking about pawns in the game, the total weaponization of Black trauma. And so then there is a term called Atmos kinesias, capital ATMOS kinesias, which means the total manipulation of one's emotions, pain, and trauma that has never been properly dealt with. So, Jason, as we move forward here, it's going to get deeper here. As we're talking about pawns in the game, the total weaponization of Black trauma. So, you and I had talked about the term problem reaction solution, where the deep state creates a manufactured crisis in order to solicit a reaction from a people who don't know who they are, because the deep state has mastered Black emotions, Black pain, and Black trauma for centuries. So, working through problem reaction solution, They force us, Jason, to react by destroying our own neighborhoods. And then we come back 6 weeks later and we say, where is the store? You burnt it down. And then it will force the deep state to give us a solution that they already had, Jason, before they created the crisis. That's problem reaction solution. But you also have non-reaction solution or non-problem reaction solution. Whereas you don't need a real problem, Jason. You only need to create the perception of a real problem. I want to say that again because that's a very powerful paradigm where the deep state strategically, especially against people of color, will create, okay, a artificial crisis where to the black mind, not all, but most of us, it represents a real problem when in actuality, it's only the perception of a real problem and not the problem in and of itself. That's the manipulation of perceived reality through perceived control. How do you control a people through fear and ignorance? So, which takes us to the terms of neuroplasticity. You and I have touched on this psychological term for the past 2 to 3 months. Neuroplasticity is when the human brain becomes the very shape of what the individual is thinking at that moment, which produces neuroparasitology. Because of the elasticity of the human brain, now it forces the individual to make wrong decisions about their diet. Whereas fast food, McDonald's, Popeyes, and Burger King, and many black neighborhoods have like death insurance. That's the image of contagion or fear. Not that there's not any death insurance in white neighborhoods, but the great totality, the percentage of funeral homes, death insurance, fast food, dollar stores are in black and Latino neighborhoods. Excellent picture there, Jason. That is the total symbology of neuroparasitology, where through bad dieting, the food becomes parasitic, and thereby the thinking process to make a proper decision becomes parasitic. That is neuroparasitology.
Bishop, if I might
So
expand on that for just a moment,
yes,
I think it's important because this is something that I got very into before you and I met. You know, I was getting older, gaining weight, drinking too much alcohol. I cut out alcohol. I lost a lot of weight. I focused on healthy food. And there is no doubt, for me at least, that it cleared up my perception. And it makes sense. Your brain is part of your body. And if you're fat and hungover and feeling lethargic, your brain can't be working very well either. But I wonder, Bishop, if there's not another element to this controlling of people's emotions and thoughts and moods through the information that's fed to the unhealthy brain. Because as you're talking, I'm looking at this news report about rioting, and there seems to be an effort by the news, and I don't think this is necessarily segregated by race, but they want certain people to think that the riots aren't even happening and not a problem, and that it's being made up by Fox News or people like you and I, and then they want other people to, they're basically trying to trick people into saying there are no riots, everything's fine.
again, that's not only problem reaction solution, but that is non-problem reaction solution. Not only does the deep state want to create a catastrophe, but also they want to create the perception of a catastrophe. And at the same time, it is a combination of the two, problem reaction solution and non-problem reaction solution. Whereas through the media, we're talking about the Crack News Network with Don Sweet Tea Lemon and Christopher Fredo Cuomo, and through MSNBC, Rachel Madcow Maddow, these witches and warlocks are creating an image in the psychic of the American public, stating either there is a catastrophe or it doesn't even exist. Malcolm X said that the greatest weapon in America is the American media industrial complex. Now, as a side note, getting back to that neuroparasitology, there's been case studies, Jason, for the past 6 months concerning KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, that many, not just people of color, many people who eat that type of food end up either killing someone or acquiring some type of psyop of hate. Now, I'm not castigating KFC, but there is an element that they put within chicken, okay, that is called steroids, where they can expand the chicken like Church's Chicken or Popeyes or KFC. So it's not like the type of chicken where your mother and I fixed for us 30, 40 years ago. It is a design by the deep state, not just to create black pawns. It's beyond that. Oh, perfect analogy there, Jason. It is a psyop that will destroy humanity through class warfare. It's not about color anymore, as we're talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of black trauma, which takes us to hypercoagulation or hypercoagulability. Because of the neuroplasticity in the neuroparasitology, the bloodstream of the individual, Jason, becomes coagulated or clotted, which produces heart disease, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol, which the totality of our body cholesterol is in the brain. So if one's thinking is disordered, it raises the body cholesterol. Why? Because there is a war for our mind, like Brother Alex Jones has been teaching many years. So then, it takes us to not just through neuroplasticity and neuroparasitology and hypercoagulability, but it brings the individual to both a thrombotic state and a prothrombotic state of a poisonous thinking being, okay? Which now many Americans can barely see their shoes when they stand. Why? Because we're living in an obese generation that has become toxic. And thereby, we begin to riot because of our decision to eat the wrong type of food. Go right ahead, Jason.
Well, I wanted to add, Bishop, for anyone who might be doubting what you're saying, you know, the example that I always give, you could take 1 ounce of whiskey and drink that. And there's chemicals in it. I mean, some people could probably have 5 of those and be okay. Some people would have 1 and be pretty drunk. But 2, 3 drinks, most people will feel those effects. So a very small amount of a chemical can have an effect on you. And it's not just a matter of being overweight. Somebody could eat the healthiest food in the world, but if you eat too much of it, you're going to gain weight. The issue is the chemicals in these foods. And one of the things that I really focused on when I was trying to clean up my health and my body was the elimination of heavy metals, toxins like mercury. I was mercury toxic in 2015, way off the chart. I've reduced my blood mercury level, but there are so many compounds in the world, and particularly once we start messing with chemicals and putting them in foods, I don't think it's really well understood what type of effect this can have on people.
And then, Jason, that is one of the greatest conspiracies in American history. Whereas I believe that President Trump has to, and I believe he will, when he wins re-election, overhaul the entire American food and water supply. Now, remember, you and I had talked about the American Vaccinational Industrial Complex some weeks ago during that series, that through MRC5, that diploid cell through the Medical Research Council, okay, diploid cell 5, okay, and through PER-C6 and HEK293, the human embryonic kidney cell strain 293 cell, in the diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis vaccination. These diploid vaccinations are made out of the compound of fetus tissue, or the tissues of dead aborted fetuses. That's not only within the American pharmaceutical industrial complex via through vaccinations, but also not in every piece of food supply in our country, but a high percentage, especially in our soft drinks and our coffee made creamers and potato chips, including the hair care and makeup. Listen, women, on the cosmetic industry, not all, but a certain percentage has eyelashes and makeup that is the powder condensed composition of dead aborted fetuses. Jason, these people are both psychopaths and sociopaths. As we're talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. Maybe a couple of weeks down the road, we're going to come back to that series concerning vaccinations.
Real
And
quick,
so,
Bishop, here's
go
the
right ahead.
Canadian University McGill publishing an article saying, is it true that perfumes contain aborted fetal tissues? I don't know if you're familiar with McGill University, but it's been
Yes.
alleged to be a location where certain mind control experiments took place.
Oh, that is interesting. Now, I've heard of McGill University. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that in Montreal or
Yeah.
someplace? Yeah, that's what I thought. So then, MK Archer, which began with the Central Intelligence Agency, but the geographical location of where MK Archer started in 1953 was in Montreal, Canada. Okay. Now, I've heard of McGill University, but I did not know concerning McGill University's connection with mind control, behavior modification. Excellent link there, Jason. And again, that's a part of pawns in the game, not just with Black people, but the weaponization, okay, of global trauma on another level. So you have the manipulation of thought, which now that manipulation is taught through our thinking, which becomes language, dialect, and speech. So then, as we are examining this pawns in the game, let's go a little deeper. Now, one of my favorite theologians, quickly, before we get further into this deep foundation concerning pawns in the game, is Baruch de Spinoza when he said, what altar of refuge can a man find when he commits treason against the majesty of reason? In other words, the deep state is creating manufactured crises in order to solicit a response from a people who don't know who they are. So, Black America, you are Americans. You are not an African. Listen, that's not the name of the original continent. That came from Leo Scipio, who was not born with that name, but the term or the title Africanus was given to Leo Scipio. Thereby, he becomes Leo Scipio Africanus, who defeated Hannibal during the Second Punic War in 202 BC, and then defeated Hannibal and overthrew Carthage, which is present day Libya and Tanzania, and renamed the continent, Jason, from Alkebulan, which means the Garden of Eden, to Africanus, which is Africa today. So that man right there, Jason, that is the attachment where Black people are tied to. This man that you're showing right there, this is the reason why God has anointed me and risen you and I up to expose this fallacy. As we're talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. So then,
Real
as
quick,
we go
Bishop,
further, go right ahead.
why is his nose smashed off like the Sphinx? Is that some standard desecration or just an accident?
You know what? I don't believe it's by accident. Just like many of the Sphinx of Giza in Egypt today, going back thousands of years, Alexander the Great, right, and Napoleon, especially with the Napoleon, he used to blow off the noses of the Sphinx because the noses were too wide. Okay, So the noses of the Sphinx were in the features were of men of color, black men. But this homosexual Napoleon blew off the noses of these Sphinx. Same here with Leo Scipio Africanus, though he wasn't a black man, but during the Roman Empire era, if the nose of a man's statue was blown off, it means the total decapitation politically of that family. And that double ego there that you just showed a minute ago is tied to going back to the Nazi Party, another topic for another day. Now, again, 97%, Jason, there was a study that was done a few years ago stating that 97% of the thinking of mankind is connected to fear. Okay. So when we're talking about the contagion of fear, 97% of the thinking of mankind is connected to some psyop of what you and I call fear. Now, as we go back to the transatlantic slave trade, now, Jason, what I'm about to say for the next half hour, okay, and then hopefully we can be done by 3 or however, because this is powerful here. We have to look at the condition of Black America is being interconnected to slavery. Now, I am a Black conservative. You know me very well, Jason. I don't teach victimhood. But in order for America to understand the clinical psychology of Black thought and emotion, we have to look at the premise of the global Atlantic slave trade, which actually started in 1441, okay, which did not kick into being here in the United States until at least in the 1700s. But from 1441, think about this, Jason, from 1441 to 1865, okay, the ratification of the 13th Amendment, thereby abolishing slavery here in the United States. Over 430 years of global enslavement, 430 years of global enslavement, where Black people are now not liberated, Jason, they are emancipated. Allow me to explain that. Now, Bishop, what does the word emancipation mean? Now, remember in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation. But, Jason, it was never called the Proclamation of Liberty, because emancipation means an old slave that has been redesigned manumissionally as a new slave. So Black America is not free. We're only emancipated, or we have become a slave that is controlled by the legal system of the left. So, what is the difference between emancipation versus liberty? Emancipation means that the slave of yesteryear would become an upgraded new design slave today through paying taxes and rent and mortgage. Mortgage comes from the root word mort, from whence we get the term mortuary, death. Rent means to twist. Remember the movie Saw, to twist a body. So that's rent. A renter is an appeaser, from whence we get the term peasant. A peasant is a slave whose intent is to appease the landlord, okay? Whereas the landlord, the banking system, now has to answer to the real estate corporations, which then has to answer to Rothschilds and Pritzkers and Oppenheimers. That's emancipation, Jason. So it's not called the Proclamation of Liberty, because liberty means the total freedom of a people who are not tied to a second constitution. In other words, the first constitution in 1776 that was ratified three times, 1781, 1787, and 1789. The first constitution, Jason, oh, I love teaching, it only designed, the framers created our nation, Jason, not to be a corporation. The framers created our nation based upon the eternal word of God, the gospel of Jesus Christ, that man is free. He's liberated from the tyranny of the British crown. So then, according to the first constitution in 1776, the Internal Revenue Service is an illegal entity. And the only reason why, Jason, my friend, that we have an Internal Revenue Service is because of the second constitution through the Act of 1871. Because the term act does not come into being until 1871. What does act mean? Well, act is the acronym of an actor, a stage, a play, a false flag event. So now the United States is now called the United States of America, which means because of the second constitution of the Enforcement Acts of 1870 and more specifically 1871, we have become a corporation. We have become a bill of lading where 300 million corporations, human beings, Americans, are looked upon as chattel, property, okay? Something that can be bought and sold on the stock market, through your birth certificate, even through your death certificate number, depending what state that you live in, is still traded on Wall Street as if you are still alive. Jason, this is pawns in the game, the weaponization, and not just Black trauma, the weaponization of the trauma of humanity. So emancipation means the human being has become a controlled asset of the system. Emancipation. But liberty means that you are not emancipated according to a system, whereas you have to pay taxes, whereas you have to have a social security number, socialism number. Most Black people's numbers, not all, but a certain percentage, we have odd numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So out of those 9 digits, maybe 5 or 6 of them are odd and the rest are even. And non-people of color or white people have even numbers, not all. And a lot of white people have odd numbers, but most of their 9-digit social security number has even numbers of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Odd is 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Why is that? Because of the second constitution. Whereas the state, because of liberal democratic policies since 1871, has designated you and I as a share. Now, if you and I are sold as a share in IRA, okay, a hedge fund, the question is, who is the pimp? The pimp is Wall Street. The pimp is the New York Stock Exchange. The pimp is the global stock market system. It's not about color anymore. It's global control through enslavement of what you and I call emancipation.
But
So,
Bishop, help me understand this a little better,
yes,
because I've heard it for so long that people's birth certificates and social security numbers are traded on the stock market. But first of all, I don't understand how that would make any money, and where is that happening? Like, how can we figure that out a little bit better?
in other words, matter of fact, I've got three minister friends who are stockbrokers on Wall Street, and they did a test on my birth certificate number a year ago. Whereas your birth certificate number, okay, now go back to 1990. Colonel Edward Mandell House, okay, a senior advisor to President Woodrow Wilson, had said in 1990, and I will quote a part of what Colonel Edward Mandell House said. He says that the deep state will create a ancient pledging system that's not only taxes, but also the stock market system. We're going to create a taxation system, the same system that we fought against during the American Revolutionary War. Now we're going to take that pledging system, taxation with representation, and we're going to force the American people to pay taxes, but we're going to incorporate the human being as a stock through their biological property. What is your biological property? Your birth certificate number and your death certificate number. Now, is that all of the numbers that Wall Street is trading? No, it's only a small percentage, but you are sold to the highest bidder and you don't even know it. And you may be worth millions of dollars. This is a system from the left, not because of the first Constitution, my friend, but because of the second Constitution. The first Constitution, the Social Security number, is an illegal entity. According to the first Constitution, the birth certificate and a death certificate are illegal entities. And according to the first Constitution, my friend, not only is your social security number, okay, your birth certificate and your death certificate illegal, but the Internal Revenue Service is an illegal entity. Now, I'm not telling people don't pay your taxes. You don't want the government to come after you. All I'm saying is that from the first Constitution, that's a constitution of liberty. But the second Constitution in 1871, that's a constitution of emancipation through corporatocracy. Whereas the United States goes from the United States for America to the United States of America. Now you also have a driver's license number, a state ID number, because of the second Constitution. Whereas the human being, an American, becomes a ward of the state, a stock, a commodity, something that can be shared to other pinsters, stock markets around the world. So then, Jason, what is the difference again between emancipation and liberty? Emancipation is from the second Constitution that was created by the deep state with Rothschild money out of Great Britain, with religious pressure from the Vatican through Pope Pius IX, putting pressure on President Ulysses S. Grant to destroy or to annul the first Constitution in order for you and I to be a corporation of the second Constitution. This is going to blow your mind. You probably already know this, Jason, as we're just breaking down Pawns in the Game, right? Excellent picture there, Jason. Pawns in the Game, the weaponization of not just Black trauma, but the trauma of America. The first Constitution was created through the framers for Jason Goodman and Bishop Larry Gaiters to become a American sovereign. In other words, the God through the framers never designed you and I to be a citizen. A sovereign is a free human being under God with liberty and justice for all, not taxed by an illegal system, the Internal Revenue Service. We don't have to have a social security number, whereas your security is based on the socialistic numbering system that came up out of the Soviet Union that is Marxist in its foundation. So you and I are a sovereign citizen according to the first Constitution. But according to the second Constitution, they don't want you and I to be a sovereign citizen, to be a Christian American, a part of a Christian constitutional American system. The second Constitution has forced the sovereign person to become a U.S. citizen, whereas you are beholden to the state through a birth certificate, a death certificate, a driver's license number, a state ID number, okay, including you are a stock, a commodity, a corporation, which gives the state the right to tax you. That's illegal, Jason, according to the first Constitution. Now you have over 300 million pawns on this American chessboard game. Not because of the first Constitution, but because of the illegal second Constitution, which has caused Americans to be both emancipated and enslaved. Jump in anytime, Jason.
Well,
if
real
you see
quick,
something.
Bishop, I wanted to bring up this African burial ground, which I had been to a ton of times, but didn't know about it until you told me. And then we started looking at some of the symbols and some of the things around there. This, as you've told me, was the original stock market where slaves were traded.
Yes.
And I just discovered something that I've never seen before, despite the numerous times we've looked at this. We've spoken many times, Bishop, about how this thing in the center, it's got the compass rose, and it's got kind of several references to this star or sun or
Yes.
whatever it is, including this sigil over here across the street that has
yes.
the skeleton of a slave with a baby in her arms. And then I just noticed this is right in front of the courthouse downtown. And when we come over on top of this building, it's amazing, Bishop. Look, is it a pentagram?
Oh,
Pentagon.
my goodness. A pentagon. Oh, my goodness. Jason, in
Oh no,
other
it's six
words,
sides. It's
it's
six
a six
sides.
sides. Kind of a hexagram. So a hexagram that is birthed from a pentagon, a hexagram. So now there are over 20,000 souls or slaves buried beneath the ground of Wall Street. So it's called Wall Street. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, Jason, concerning pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. The reason why the New York Stock Exchange became the New York Stock Exchange from the Cotton Exchange, because the stock was the indigenous African or Alkebulan slave. So the stock was not IBM in Coca-Cola or Frito-Lay, but the stock was a human being. So Wall Street is designed and called Wall Street because all of these black men, women, and babies were lined up from the East River going in front of the Presbyterian church that you now see in Wall Street, lined up going down to the East River. They were walled up and they were sold to the banking houses like AIG, Chase Manhattan Bank, Aetna Assurance, New York Life, all of these American corporations that have built their billions, Jason, on the back of indigenous African people. Now, I'm not teaching victimhood, but what I'm teaching is the reason why that you see a people reacting because they never dealt with their historical pain and their historical trauma concerning generations of being enslaved psychologically. So Wall Street is where the stock is sold. Now the companies that once bought the slave. Now, as a side note, Jason, before we get back to emancipation versus liberty, I'm so glad that you brought up Wall Street. The term, Jason, draft, like the NBA draft or the NFL draft or the NHL or Major League Baseball draft, the term draft means a person that is on the stocks or on the platform being looked and examined by the slave master. That's why you have the NFL combine. Now, during the transatlantic slave trade, not only in America, but around the world, okay, there were actual combines, I kid you not, Jason, where slave masters would test men and women, especially men, how fast they could run, the mass of their muscle index, their body mass compared to the fat mass on their body. So the combine, the NBA combine, the NFL combine that you and I see today originated out of the American slave trade, where the slave masters would put people on the selling block or draft in order for them physically to be tested. Jason, perfect link. So then the combine means a combination of both old slave and a new emancipated slave. Jason, as we're talking about the pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. So 430 years of slavery, which then takes us, Jason, to the era of feudalism. Now, one may say, Bishop, what is the era of feudalism? The term feudalism means a system of enslavement through taxation, taxing one's property, taxing one's home in order to pay the state. So the global slave masters knew from the left that slavery could not continue forever. So they designed a global system, Jason, called a feudalistic system, whereas they create the system of debt. That is the paradigm, Jason, of pawns in the game, because whoever controls the debt controls everything. You see, my friend, what I'm about to say may sound like a paradoxical view, but allow me to say it because this is very powerful. As we're talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. The goal of deep state bankers, my friend, is really not to make money. It's not to make money. It's not even to control the flow of weapons in a given conflict. The goal of the deep state is to control the debt that the conflict produces. In other words, Jason, when we're talking about global debt, okay, where we're talking about individuals or nations or kingdoms, they're slaves to debt. So then, the goal of feudalism is to create the psyop of debt, which is the offspring of the global slave trade. We cannot enslave you physically anymore, but we can enslave you through your money supply. Whereas the black families today, most of them are renters. Why? Because the system has designed it not for them to pay a mortgage. So the term feudalism is the offspring, Jason, of the pawns in the game. The banking system is designed not to liberate the human being. The banking system is designed, my friend, to keep the pawn a pawn in order to perpetuate generationally manipulations of both pain and trauma that will weaponize our actions to riot. So, this term manumission or emancipation is now called feudalism. Now, the American urban ghetto industrial complex, my friend, which was created by FDR in the 1930s, okay, on the 27th of June in 1934. And later, during the 1964 and 65 Great Society New Deal Act, through one of the most racist presidents in modern US history, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who said, and I quote, I'm going to keep these NIGGERs in the Democratic Party for 200 years. It's working. So we're talking pawns in the game, the weaponization of not just Black trauma, but the trauma of America. So to understand what's going on in Wisconsin, Minneapolis, here in New York City, Chicago, and now in Louisville, we have to look at the background of feudalism in order for you and I, my friend, to understand the foreground, what's happening in Louisville, Kentucky. So, feudalism is a legal, economic, military, cultural reformation act where Jason is getting excited now, where the citizen, because of the second constitution, becomes a vassal state. What is a vassal state? A vassal state is a person who is not an American sovereign from the first constitution. They have become an American citizen of the second constitution, a vassal state, a person that has become a stock, a commodity that has become subservient through credit to their landlord, to their monarch, and the monarch to the system. That is called feudalism in connection to a vassal state. So we have over 300 million vassal states here in the United States. And Jason, my friend, we have 7.7 billion vassal states who are living under the global psyop of a second constitution. That's why they want to kill Trump, because God has anointed him. I'm not saying he's perfect, Jason. I'm saying they fear President Trump because he is destroying the second constitution in order to restore you and I to the origin of our originations of the first constitution. As we're talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. Jump in anytime if you've seen
Real
something,
quick,
Jake.
Bishop, JLAP777 in the comments has just hit on something tremendous. JLAP says 501c3, 5 plus 1 is 6, C equals 3, plus 3 equals 6, 666. It's quite interesting.
Can you say that again, Jason?
Well, the 501c3, for people who don't know, is a tax-exempt corporation. So they don't pay taxes, and that would make them outside of this vassal state system that you're talking about. And on other shows with other guests, 501c3s have come up so many times, Bishop. Charles Ortel is investigating the Clintons' abuse of the Clinton Foundation as a 501c3. He's brought forward tremendous evidence. I've been sued by Robert David Steele when I pointed out that his 501c3 is not registered with the New York State Attorney General. And Barry Diller, who is the owner of IAC, not to be confused with the CIA. This is the Interactive Corporation that owns Vimeo, which has just recently started striking videos on the subscriber-only channels for Crowdsource, The Truth on Subscribestar and Patreon, trying to destroy my business, Bishop. So this is an interesting connection that I've always thought, why are these 501c3s so frequently abused? It may be that they are existing outside of this vassal system, Bishop.
That's exactly, my brother, my friend, you hit this right on the head. The 501c3 is an illegal entity according to the first Constitution. Because the first Constitution never designed the separation of church and state. I don't care what these liberal lawyers are going to email you concerning, oh, bishops not telling the truth. I don't care. 501c3 is an illegal entity that is the offspring, Jason, of the second Constitution, where they want to separate church and state. But the founding fathers, those great men who were not perfect, yes, they were slave owners, and they repented to God. But they did not want the Church of Jesus Christ to be separated from the state. In other words, America was designed to be not a democratic nation, Jason. No, America was designed to be a Christian constitutional republic built upon the gospel of Jesus Christ, the eternal word of God, whereas the United States government in Washington, D.C. is supposed to be a theocratic government ruled by God through elected officials. That's according to the first Constitution. But now in the second Constitution comes the separation of church and state via the 501c3, which is now being abused by so many people. So then, Jason, again, this is a part, all of us, like you said on last week, are pawns in the game, not just black people. It's not about color anymore. It's about class warfare, okay?
Yeah.
So, Jason, it gets deeper here. And so jump in anytime if you see something. So feudalism is a system today that where every human being becomes a vassal state. So the term vassal is a Vaticanized term. Like the term Christianity. I'm going to blow your mind now. Jason, you already know this. There's a difference between the Christian faith versus Christianity. The Christian faith is the truth from the gospel of Jesus Christ, the life in the ministry of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whose name is the Lord Jesus Christ, and the founding of the true church of Jesus Christ in the book of the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2. That's the Christian faith. Now, anything that God has in truth, the Christian faith in Acts 2, Satan has a counterfeit. So the term Christianity, whereas the last 5 letters, anity, is a Roman term, Jason, meaning the legalization or the emancipation of the Christian faith. In other words, Constantine in 313 AD tried to destroy the original church from Acts chapter 2 by legalizing it or in order to Vaticanize the original church. So the Roman Catholic Church is not the true church of Jesus Christ according to Acts chapter 2. That's why they call it Christianity. They add Christ and they insert the Roman Vatican term, anity, which means to control, like anity, sanity, insanity. So there's a difference between the Christian faith, the day of Pentecost, which is the true faith, which was once delivered into the saints, compared to the counterfeit faith called Christianity. Anity means the church is now controlled by the state called the Vatican. That's why God has risen me up to expose this so I can tell the apostolic church, which is the true church, that we've got to remove the entity part because Christianity is the Christian second constitution. The first constitution through a spiritual paradigm is Acts chapter 2. The second Christian constitution was born in 313 AD within the Roman Empire, where Constantine and his homosexual lover, Pope Sylvester, had tried to destroy the first constitution, okay, the Christian faith, in order to create a counterfeit faith with the word anity. Anity means the Christian faith has been Vaticanized. Jason, these are pawns in the game, okay? The total weaponization of not just black trauma, but world trauma. And you notice that, and say right there, Jason, if you can, notice there that Pope holding up the two fingers, okay?
Yeah.
That is a Roman 666 sign. It not only represents a pyramid or a pyramid, but a 666 system. Well, the Nazi Party, SS, used that hand sign. Many Catholic paintings of the saints use that hand sign. That's not from the Christian faith in Acts 2. That's from the Vatican system called Christianity. So I'm saying to my Christian brothers and sisters, stay in the Christian faith, but don't allow yourself to become Anakinized or Vaticanized, as we're talking about pawns in the game. Go right ahead, Jason. Looks like you had a comment.
When you said Anakinized, it reminded me of, Star Wars, where they deal with good and evil, and Anakin Skywalker goes to the dark side and becomes evil. And then also in this painting, Bishop, this guy, whoever it is that's kneeling in front of the Pope, the shirt being worn by this person behind him kind of it looks like he's wearing a kind of a crown, or maybe like ray of sun behind him, but it's just this guy's robe.
Yes. Yes. And Jason, you're hitting powerful nerves with me. There's a word that came to my mind called mitre, kept on the M-I-T-R-E with the E silent, mitre. Now, going back to Pope Boniface VIII in 1302, when he created the global demonic decree called Unum Sanctum, that all souls or citizens belong to the Vatican. Every piece of birth certificate is housed in the Vatican Bank, Jason. Now, the birth certificates that's throughout the world in 207 nations, those are just copies of the original Unum Sanctum birth certificate. Pope Boniface VIII, whose spirit was invoked through the creation of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1935 by Bill Wilson, this Unum Sanctum put into decree on the 18th of November, 1302, was enacted into global law, Jason, through Pope Boniface VIII, whereas they created the origin of the birth certificate, or where the Vatican certified the soul of the individual not to be a sovereign man and woman, but to be a citizen of Rome. The term citizen did not start here in the United States. The term citizen came up out of Rome. The term feudalism came up out of Rome. The birth certificate, your death certificate, the term court or probation are Vatican words, Jason, that has permeated throughout American society and around the world. It was both Pope Boniface VIII and Pope Pius IX who had designed the birth certificate beginning in 1302 with Pope Boniface VIII, that the soul is now become a certificate, a stock, a commodity, a bill of lading that can be sold without your permission. That's why President Trump is going to destroy this. As we're talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. So, feudalism, vassal state, where the individual is now controlled by the state within their region and country. Jason, also the term vassal, Jason, uh, comes from the root term snitch, like a snitch, someone who snitches. So the moniker for a vassal is a snitcher. Another topic for another day. So the vassal state, the individual who is no more a sovereign, Jason, a free person in God, they are a citizen. They have to pay taxes, rent, mortgage. This is where we get the term mortuary or death. They have to pay death and taxes to a landlord. The landlord pays it to a monarch, and a monarch pays it to an appellate. This is where we get the term appellate court. What is an appellate today? Not just the court system, but the banking system. So the landlord pays what you pay them as far as land taxes, property taxes, rent, or mortuary or mortgage to a landlord who then pays it to the lord of the manor, who then pays it to a monarch, who then controls the system. Jason, that's emancipation. That is the crux of Emancipation Proclamation that was enacted into law in 1863 through President Abraham Lincoln. He had no desire to liberate Black people, only to control them as a controlled asset of the North against the South. Oh, this it gets heavy here, Jason. I'm not even getting into Breonna Taylor, but what's happening with Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rodney King, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, those are the pawns on the monopoly board who are just the manifestations of feudalism, vassal statism, which is nothing more than enslavement. They are property that are used to checkmate a particular city, Minneapolis and Louisville. So there's a term, Jason, I want you to examine. You already know this. This term is called a tribunal. So a tribunal is a present day financial slave master, okay? Whereas the state, you have to pay property taxes to the city, county, state, and federal through a tribunal from whence you and I get the term tribute or taxes, taxation with representation. So the very system that we fought against during the 1776 American Revolutionary War is now the same system that is enslaving America because of the Second Constitution. So this term, my friend, feudalism comes from the acronym word, excellent link there, Jason. So then feudalism comes from the acronym word fief, capital FIEF, which is a central element of the system. Who? The individual. So emancipation is feudalism, which is a fief, which is heritable property or a lot to purchase only to rent. Even if you pay off the property, a 30-year mortgage, you don't own actually the property if you don't pay property taxes. Jason, that's Emancipation Proclamation from 1863, ratified through the 13th Amendment in 1865. Whereas the individual who is no longer a sovereign but a citizen because of the second constitution, they have to pay, okay, their landlord. The landlord pays the lord of the manor, okay, the banking system, who pays the overlord, okay, central banking bankers who are connected to real estate corporations, and then both landlord, okay, the lord of the manor. So you have landlord, the lord of the manor, the overlord, all subservient to the king, Rothschild, Pritzker, Oppenheimer. That's a system that doesn't care about color anymore. Has nothing to do with color. It's classism, but not racism. But the ones who created, Jason, feudalism, they want to create through non-problem reactionary solution a fallacy called racism. Now, does racism exist in our country? Yes. Or is some, excuse me, is some of that racism systemic? Yes. But for the most part, Jason, America is not a racist country. Yes, there's racism, okay? But the left, they want to perpetuate financial power through emancipation, combine, feudalism, combining the NFL combine, combining feudalism, thief in order to create a peasant. Well, my friend, what is a peasant? A peasant is a person who's been designed through enslavement to appease. This is where the word peasant comes from. They are appeasers to the landlord, to the monarch. In other words, Jason, we're living in a world that's rooted in global enslavement. So then, the 1863 Emancipation Proclamation, it never liberated the slave. It only emancipated or recontrolled, it rebuilt the old slave into a new design slave. LeBron James, the late Kobe Bryant, okay, Samuel L. Jackson, okay, Django Unchained. These men and women, Oprah Winfrey and her girlfriend Gail Stale King, who are not only a part of the Boule Secret Society, but also they are slaves, emancipated slaves who are nothing more than crabs within the barrel. So then, Jason, the ratification of the 13th Amendment. 13 on the back of the $1 bill, it has a 13-step pyramid up to the top of the eye of Ptah, Ra, or Lucifer. And at the same time, that pyramid has 72 sections of bricks. Another topic for another day. So the ratification of the 13th Amendment simply means the legality of a upgraded slave, Jason. Okay. So whereas the slave master is not physical, but financial and legal through emancipation. That is a part of the pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. Jason is going to get even deeper here. I'm not even talking about Breonna Taylor. I am laying foundation to give you a background of the conditions that were created both in this country and around the world that gave birth to Louisville, Kentucky. So the Emancipation Proclamation should have been called the Proclamation of Liberty. They are not interested, they, the left, are not interested in the liberation of the Black family. They only want to control you through victimization. You're a victim. Someone owes you something. You deserve reparations because you need to be repaired. You deserve affirmative action because you are an affirmative property. Stock, slave, peasant, renter, vassal state. Jason, it is the continuation of slavery in this very moment. Now, in 1865, the ratification of the 13th Amendment now legalized a new redesigned slave system, whereas the slave cannot actually own property, even though you paid off the mortgage, mortuary. You paid off the mortgage, okay, but yet you don't own the property because you're paying land taxes as a vassal state. Jason, it gets deeper here. So then, talking about this global enslavement through the pawns in the game, right? The total weaponization of Black trauma. This is where we get the term rent or a renter. A renter, Jason, is what we call an appeaser, a peasant, an ant, one who appeases the landlord, who appeases the overlord, the real estate company, who appeases the king, the banker. It is an emancipated system, not just enslaving Black people, but everyone, as you said so powerfully last week, were all pawns in the game. So an appeaser then gives birth to a applicant. An applicant. Let me give you an example of that, Jason. In China right now, the Chinese financial system, if you and I lived in China and we wanted to apply for a home loan or a car loan, you and I will have to fill out an online application. And according to how fast and how quick we finish the application, it would depend on your credit score. That's crazy. The faster you apply, the faster you complete your online application, the higher the credit score. Now, the slower you complete the online application, the lower the credit score. If you have a low credit score in China, you cannot travel outside of the country. You can only travel within China. You can't travel outside of China if you have a low credit score. That is built on feudalism, okay? A vassal state, China, which is enslavement. So the peasant is an appeaser who becomes an applicant, a renter, one who is stretched. Like in the movie Saw, the term rent means to twist. So in medieval Europe, if the renter could not pay his or her rent, they were twisted to death. Well, that's where the word renter comes from. It comes from. It means the renting or the twisting of a corporate body or a body of a human being. So, peasant, an appeaser, okay, who is an applicant, okay, who is now building the system of the monarch, the Rothschilds, whereas the Rothschilds control 75% of not just the world's wealth, but they control 75% of the world's credit. In other words, President Trump wants to destroy the Rothschilds because they are a global demonic slave master, not because they're Jewish. Has nothing to do with that. Evil is evil. I don't care what the person's ethnicity is. As you and I are talking about, pawns in the game. Excellent picture there, Jason. Pawns in the game. The weaponization of black trauma. Jump in anytime.
Well, this is
So
Wilbur Ross, Bishop, the U.S. Commerce
yes,
Secretary and former N.M. Rothschild banker who was involved in the financial bailout of Donald Trump. And now he's the Commerce Secretary, and he's like
yeah.
very old. The last time I saw him on television, he seemed like he was in prime shape for a wrestling match with Joe Biden. But I met this guy and asked him to talk about Serco and its control of the U.S. Patent Office, but he didn't want to talk about that.
You see, Jason, and I heard recently, a couple of weeks ago, that this individual is very sick right now. I don't
Yeah,
know
he
if
doesn't look
I
good.
don't know how true that is, but thank God for you and thank God for David Hawkins exposing this man's connection to the Rothschild. So if I'm Donald Trump, I would not have any Rothschild people in my cabinet. I understand the phrase, keep your friends close,
Enemies
but keep your
closer,
enemies
yeah.
closer. Yeah, there's a statement. Stitch in time saves nine, which means nine can keep a secret of if eight are dead. Another topic for another
Right.
day. So then back to Paul. You're going to have me start preaching here, Jason.
Well, but
Anyway,
Bishop, the
I'm
one
just
thing I
kidding.
need to
Yeah.
tell you, and I'm sorry I didn't tell you this when we were getting ready, we had a little sound problem. I've got an eye doctor appointment that I've got to get to pretty soon, and I hate to cut our
Okay.
session short, but we need to stick to about 90 minutes if we can.
Yeah, yeah. So how many more time? Much more time?
If we can wrap up in 5 minutes and then take it to part 3 next week.
Yeah, let's absolutely. We'll take it to part three next week. In my conclusion, in the next 3 to 5 minutes. So to understand pawns in the game, the total weaponization of not just black trauma, but human trauma. It is rooted, my friend, in a feudalistic system that's not of God. And in my conclusion, remember some months ago, Jason, I had exposed the Walmart Corporation back in 2010. They were exposed, and there was 132 Floridian employees who had passed on, right? And Walmart had created a system called Dead Peasants Insurance. Whereas the corporation, like Walmart, would give out, sell life insurance to its employees. If that employee dies, the family of the employee doesn't get the money or the benefits. The corporation does. That's called dead peasants insurance.
Oh,
And
wow.
Walmart is nothing more than the present day, slave master system. Now, in my conclusion, Jason, in connection to not just dead peasants insurance, and they have what they have, janitors insurance. Oh, that's another topic for another day, and we have
Wow.
time next week. We'll bring that up. So Walmart was sued for millions of dollars because they created not only dead peasants insurance, but Walmart and many other American corporations had also created, Jason, a system called COLI or COLI, like E. coli, COLI, which means corporation owned life insurance.
Wow.
Corporation owned life insurance or COLI or what we call electronic co-life,
Wow.
a corporate-owned life insurance. For executives, it is dead peasants insurance for executives at the executive level. If they die, their families don't get any life insurance benefits. The company does. And I will end it there today, Jason, for volume 2 of Pawns in the Game, the Weaponization of Black Trauma. Powerful, mind-blowing information that your listeners receive here today, my friend.
Absolutely, Bishop. I did not know that about Walmart, but I mean, that's amazing. We see the lawsuits and everything right there. There is some connection between Hillary Clinton and Walmart, and also Peter Smith, who is recorded as having committed suicide, but we've done a pretty extensive investigation, including traveling to the crime scene, and there is a lot of evidence to suggest that he did not commit suicide. One of the last places he went to was Walmart.
Wow, Jason. Again, you're blowing my mind again, my friend, because in the final analysis, when we look at the life of the Clintons, they have to be brought to justice
Yeah.
because they have been the purveyors of corruption. They are the very rot of what corruption is in the American political system. And I guarantee you that the death of Seth Rich is connected to Hillary Clinton at some level. So we will get into that next week as well. It's so many historical ley lines and tentacles that we're going to get into next week concerning Pawns in the Game, the Weaponization of Black Trauma, Volume 3. I'm looking forward to it, my friend.
And just in our last moments before we go, Bishop, I know everybody is anxious to hear your comments on President Trump's recovery from coronavirus. He came out of Walter Reed Medical Center last night. I think it was a smart and important thing for the president to show strength. And the Secret Service, of course, is there to protect him, to risk their lives, to protect the President of the United States. There's strategic value in showing strength. We don't want enemies around the world to think that the president is weak. What do you think?
You see that the President Donald J. Trump exuded strength. He was presidential, strong, looked good, right? He didn't look sick to me. And President Trump will have to be careful from here on out who he brings in the Oval Office. He has to be careful what restaurants he goes to. He has to be careful. He has to examine the cooks in the kitchen at the White House because the deep state wants to take him out. But we know that no weapon that's formed against President Trump shall prosper. And you know what, Jason, I'll say this quickly and let you go. President Trump reminds me of the Roman general by the name of Sulla, capital Sulla, because when you know Roman military history, General Sulla, who was around the same age that President Trump is now, marched into Rome in order to purge and to liquidate the city of traitors and usurpers. By all accounts, Jason, it was a total bloodbath. So General Sulla, his greatest rival was a young man by the name of young Marius, who was just 26 years old at the time. After General Sulla, or President Trump, had him killed, forcing young Marius to commit suicide, General Sulla decapitated the head of young Marius. So then General Sulla went into the forum, the Senate in Rome, lifting the head of the young decapitated head of this young man, Marius. Think about it. So Sulla carries the decapitated head, Jason, of young Marius into the Senate, and he looked into the eyes of young Marius, the decapitated head, and said, "First, you must learn to pull the oar. Only then can you take the helm."
Wow.
After he said that, then General Sulla took the decapitated head of young Marius, okay, Kamala Harris. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Another topic for another day. and went to the parents of young Marius and put the decapitated head within the hands of the father of young
Ooh.
Marius, named Gaius Marius. And then General Sulla said, and I quote, "Your power has now become obsolete."
Wow.
General Sulla today is President Donald J. Trump, who is going to cut off the head of the global Baphomet Luciferian deep state. And that concludes volume 2 of Pawns in the Game, the weaponization of Black trauma. And I thank you, my friend.
Powerfully spoken, Bishop. I want to thank everybody for watching and remind people you can support the Bishop's global spiritual revolution by going to paypal.me/GSRR Media Group and making a financial contribution of your choice. You can also sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. You're going to get access to a large library of sponsor exclusive content, and you keep this type of show going. I couldn't bring you guests like Bishop Gaiters without your support and sponsorship. Bishop, thank you so much. We'll be back next Tuesday. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks for watching.
Thanks, Jason.